So my name's Tim, very glad to be here. I'll time myself if that's okay. Is that all right with you? Okay, very good. Grateful member of Al-Anon, very glad to be here today in a meeting. I'm very fond of Chelsea. My mother lived here for many years, and so my childhood was full of a lot of stories. I know all the things that were on the King's Road in the 1960s. None of those are there anymore. And I spent a lot of time in Chelsea in the late 80s and early 90s, and everything has changed even since then. It's also very nice to be in a Moravian church. I'm a little bit familiar with the Moravian church, and I like it a lot. But that's irrelevant. What is relevant is my first Al-Anon meeting was just up the road in Flood Street in 1995, in September 1995, so 29 years ago. And it was funny, as we were going around the room saying how we were, one of the things I love about Al-Anon is the instinctive sense that one gets that I notice stuff as an Al-Anon in the lives of the people around me and the world around me, which other people don't seem bothered by. But I've spotted everything. And it's a lot. What is going on out there in the people in my life and in the world, and it's just a lot to deal with. And if I can keep it over there, I'm just about fine. But I need to keep it over there and not let it inside the hula hoop. And I could hear that with some of the people. I could hear that there was a lot going on, but you're doing okay because it was over there, not in your face. And that's the big lesson in Al-Anon. There was spits and spots of, well, quite a lot of spits and spots of active alcoholism when I was growing up. But the real toxic soup was growing up in a household where the prevailing culture was a response to alcoholism. So I was surrounded by untreated Al-Anons. This was the terrible intrusive poison which just pervaded every cell of my being. So that when I started to encounter actual real live alcoholics on a regular basis, I knew immediately what to do. In other words, what not to do. Like get straight in there. And there's something about me. I have to admit, I love alcoholics. I do. They're a lot of fun until they're not. But that lot of fun phase is I just found them more interesting. They've got a lot going on. Ordinary people, dull. Alcoholics, not dull. A lot of things, but not dull. And I kept dating them. I kept moving in with them, and then started to express surprise that they were displaying alcoholic behaviours, like drinking too much, or drinking when they said they weren't going to drink, the whole deal. I think the process of Al-Anon has been a process of unhooking myself cell by cell by cell from other people, so that I know where I stop and other people begin. And I am 100% responsible for what I believe, what I think, what I do, what I feel, my internal world and my external world. And you are entirely responsible for yours. You're not responsible for me, and I'm not responsible for you. I'm responsible for behaving in a courteous and moral way towards other people, and where possible and appropriate to be helpful. That's it. I'm not responsible for other people's internal condition. I'm not just no. The house I grew up in, everyone was responsible for everyone else, but no one was responsible for themselves. But But you never got to find out exactly how or why. You just knew it was your fault, and you had to guess. And if you couldn't guess, it's because you didn't love the person enough. If you loved them, you'd know what you'd done. Endless scenarios like that. So this unhooking process, to me, that's what the steps are all about, is unhooking myself from other people and hooking myself onto a higher power. Now, if you're very new in Al-Anon, or indeed not new and are alarmed by the notion of a higher power or find it disagreeable, the only two things which I need to know about a higher power are that there is one, and it's not me. There is a force available in the universe. There is a source available in the universe somehow of direction, i.e. the good sense of what to do, the horse sense of what to do in a situation. And there is the ability to do it, the strength, the wherewithal to do it, and that can be acquired. And one sees that in Al-Anon, people who've acquired the sense of what to do and the ability to put it into practice. That's the only bit that I need. Anything else, and there is I have to say after all these years, there is a lot more, but those are the only two bits that are required to start the process of forming a relationship with that higher power. And one of the key elements of this process, of course, is step 9. I won't go into inordinate detail about how I was unpleasant to other people, but let's just say I was. The detail doesn't matter, really. Everyone can make a list. In step 9 it says, made amends to such people, and such people unfortunately refers back to the all people I had harmed in step 8. So it really is a complete exercise. I had an enormous amount of guilt when I got to Al-Anon, and my guiltometer, although still functioning, was miscalibrated in that I would feel guilty for things that were none of my business. So someone would come into the room with a look on their face, and of course it was my fault because the world revolved around me. Heaven forbid that other people actually existed and had their own internal worlds, that they had their own histories, that they'd been on the planet for 60 years. The only possible reason they had a look on their face must be me. And I mean, the extraordinary self-centeredness of someone who thought they had low self-worth, but at the same time thought themselves to be the prime mover and shaker behind everyone else's emotional lives. And I would feel guilty because of this. But whenever I did behave in a controlling or interfering or chiding or patronising way, or any of the other 100 ways, I would immediately, the little justification department would kick in order that I don't feel guilty about the thing that I've just done. So my guiltometer was entirely off. And in step 8, what I had to learn to do was to say precisely, what did I do? What should I have done instead? And based on what principles of the program guide that? Not just an instinctive emotional response of what should I have done instead, but some real reason involved, some real sense. And that required the involvement of another person to assess this. Because I'm in that condition, in the pre-step 9 condition, I was not in a condition to arrive at those judgments reasonably myself. I needed grown-ups, frankly, to help me do that. I mean, I was in my early 20s when I first did the steps. I'm in my 50s, of course, now, and I redo the steps on a regular basis. But in those first amends, I very much needed the help of someone else. And I didn't beat around the bush with the step 9s. Almost every single situation required a simple admission of what I'd done, the expression of regret that I'd done it, the request, is there anything I can do to make up for this? Frankly, there wasn't anything I could do because it was done. That's the whole point of the past, it's done. If it's said, it's said, and it can't be unsaid. But people did appreciate the effort. Very few people that I made amends to wanted to have anything to do with me after the amends, not because I made amends, despite the amends, but my conscience was now clear. There was nothing else I could do. So it was done, it was over. And that was the great thing. These dreadful situations were now over. There are a number of things I did at school, and I did step 9 in a number of stages, really. I did step 9 the first time when I was about a year in, and I did make a lot of amends, but I went through the steps with a finer tooth comb a number of years later and caught some items that I'd missed because I hadn't set the threshold of sensitivity to my behaviour low enough to catch some of the more minor things. And I made a series of amends to people I was at school with for arguably relatively trivial things, some of the more borderline things. But a very curious thing happened. For many years, I'd had nightmares about school, and when I completed those amends, the nightmares stopped, and I hadn't had a nightmare about school since then, making a bunch of apparently trivial amends, apparently not so trivial. The magnitude of the psychic hook in my mind has got nothing to do with the external material magnitude of the situation or the wrong or the harm. There's no relationship between the two. Some of the biggest things turned out to be very trivial, some of the smallest things turned out to be very important. And one doesn't know until one's made these amends what effect the making of the amend is going to have. But the point was to get to a situation where there was no one left in my life who I was aware of having harmed, to whom I hadn't done my utmost to make amends. And once I got to that point, this phantom of the sense that there was something wrong with me, which had been following me round my whole life, left me. There's a novel by a now very unfashionable novelist called George MacDonald called Fantastes, where there's a character who has one of these shadows following him round, and the shadow lifts at one particular point. That is exactly what it was like. It was as though the ego, which had been haunting me, had always pointed to these situations of embarrassment or harm or awkwardness or awfulness, saying, that's the reason, that's the hook we're going to hang it on. Once those hooks were no longer there, it had nothing. So my job now is to not do anything which is going to require making amends, and if I need to apologise, I'll do it quickly. But I don't grovel. There are times when one does the right thing and people are upset, and I'm just going to have to let them be upset without rushing around trying to fix it. If what I do is reasonable and it's within bounds, if someone else is oversensitive, they'll have to deal with it with their people. It is not my job to go around fixing those sorts of things. I've got to be able to live. I've got to be able to do the things that my conscience guides me to do without having to worry about what psychological backstory is behind other people's reactions. It is their business, not mine. And just one last thing. I had a very close friend who was a sober alcoholic for many years, and then suddenly was no longer a sober alcoholic, but was very much drinking alcoholic. And this time that it happened, because there were other times and there have been other people, I didn't get sucked in. I didn't get dragged down. Eventually the person died. That's sometimes what happens. There we have it. It was awful, but I'm fine. And I was fine even while it was happening. That was the extraordinary thing. The foundation that Al-Anon gave me completely unshakable. So lots of stuff going on the surface, but fundamentally I wasn't shaken. And that's because of the reliance on a higher power, and that in turn is because I think the biggest thing is the completion of the amends. That's all I've got. Thank you.